This is a VIVE Ultimate Tracker right here. These guys are really sweet, and they're also really expensive. A set of 3 comes in at about $600 US, and the ones that I bought came with the track straps that were designed specifically for these. And I just want to say, overall, this is probably the best tracking solution on the market, with a huge asterisk. See, to keep a long story short, overall, the usability of these things is fantastic. They have great inside-out tracking, they will work with virtually any VR headset with very little hassle, provided you're on PC VR, and their tracking quality is actually extremely high. The majority of the time when I'm using these trackers, I haven't really had any issues with things like desyncing or tracker drift or anything. As a matter of fact, I've found it to be more reliable and more consistent than my SteamVR base station-based tracking, which uses the lighthouses, and then your various hardware act as receivers. I have some clips on the screen right now of what the tracking quality looks like, and you can judge for yourself. But there are a couple of things that might not be super easy to see in the clips, but you do notice them when you're in VR. The first of which is that actually synchronizing these is incredibly difficult. And I'm not talking about the initial setup, we'll get to that in a moment. I'm talking about just simply getting these to actually play nice with the rest of your VR hardware. See, in order to actually get the VIVE Ultimate Trackers to sync with a headset that isn't a VIVE XR Elite, you need to do the very classic, put a controller in your hand and do a figure 8. Hold on, I'll show you. This is one of my Quest 3 controllers, and in order for me to actually synchronize it with the VIVE Ultimate Tracker, I need to hold these two like this and make sure I don't cover either of the cameras on the tracker, and I need to do a large figure 8 motion. Now that large figure 8 motion isn't too difficult, but having to unclip your tracker from, your waist or your foot and then do the tracking that way, it's a little bit of a hassle, but I get it, it's kind of necessary. And sometimes I don't have to retrack between sessions, but at other points I do. The other thing with the figure 8 here is that when you're doing the figure 8 motion, you're almost always going to get a little bit of drift. So even in the event that you do everything perfectly, you're going to find that this guy is not going to actually be where it is in real space. It's usually off by an inch or two, but at worst, I've had one tracker be misaligned with the other two and be off axis by a foot, and that can be really infuriating because it means you're not going to be able to actually properly have your VR set up, because if you move your foot around, instead of the tracker moving where it actually is, it's going to orbit around where your foot is, and that, well, it results in some very strange leg geometry, let's put it that way. Now, this in itself isn't a deal breaker, because as long as you do that at least once per session, generally, it will be fine the entire session. No, the real problems that I have with these trackers have to do with the way that they set up their tracking maps. Because the VIVE Ultimate Trackers are inside-out trackers and not outside-in, that means that these two cameras see the room around them and use that to track and figure out where the location is. They're self-tracking. And this is great, but the same things that make it great are also what make these kind of a little bit of a hassle to use. My room is incredibly well lit. I actually almost always play VR with my studio lights on, the same light that you guys are seeing so that I don't look super ugly. But even with my studio lights on, my room lights on, and windows open in broad sunlight, I still sometimes get errors on screen notifying me that my room's brightness is too low. And at other times, I've had very serious difficulties in my room because of the fact that there aren't enough things for the tracker to map to. What this basically means is that if your room is a little bit desolate and very clean, which a room that you're using for VR really should be, you're probably going to run into occasional tracking loss. And this has been my biggest gripe with these trackers. In order for me to actually use these at room scale, which is part of the appeal for me, I need to set up my tracking map in the center of my room. This isn't a super big deal, but that's also where the tracking map ends up being the worst. Where I'm standing right now is less than a quarter of the actual play area I use for VR, and this is the only spot I can really reliably stand in before these start to lose tracking. On top of this, sometimes the trackers will regain their tracking without much hassle. Other times you'll need to unclip the tracker from your foot, your thigh, wherever it is, and then hold it up and face the computer. And if you don't specifically do it in that manner, it probably won't regain tracking. Furthermore, although this has been mostly fixed now, the initial setup of these trackers for me was a complete disaster, and for the first 3 months of owning these, I literally could not use them at all. I was able to get them all to connect to the computer using the included dongle, but unfortunately, that didn't really let me do much with them because I wasn't able to ever set up a reliable tracking map. Credit where it's due to VIVE, they have been improving the tracking quality and improving the reliability of the software, and I would say that it is now in a usable state and most people should be able to get their system up and running within a couple of hours. But for an end user product, I really do think that right now these still aren't quite ready and where I would want them to be to recommend them. And that's really a shame because I really like the tracking quality of the VIVE Ultimate Trackers. They are fantastic. Due to the software gremlins that these have right now, they're very difficult for me to recommend unless you are someone that is looking for the best tracking solution that you can get, particularly for something that isn't in the SteamVR ecosystem like a Quest 3, for example, and you don't mind doing a bit of troubleshooting. That said, for the price, obviously it would be nicer if these work straight out of the box, but even in 2024, we still have to often do kind of hacky solutions. In short, these trackers are really nice, and for the last 2 months, I've actually had very little issues with them, but the several months prior of problems have made me wary about them, and I would just say that if you're looking to get these, maybe wait a little bit longer for some of the bugs to be ironed out, and I might make a follow-up video talking more about that. But as it stands right now, the tracking quality is fantastic when it works. At the end of the day though, I think that they're pretty cool. They're very small, and frankly, the clip-on mechanics that they have are incredibly nice, and I do think that they're worth considering overall. So with that in mind, if you didn't like this video, make sure to leave a dislike. Have a good day.